Hi all, my name is Shalini Nerella. Today we'll talk about Workato. In our session today, we'll have overview of Workato. We'll then discuss about the concepts in Workato. I'll then walk you through the Workato UI. We'll then do a simple recipe creation. We'll test it, and then we'll discuss about tools in Workato, and we'll conclude with the components of our recipe and glossary of terms. So let's get started with the overview of Workato. So Workato is a cloud-based enterprise automation and integration platform. It's an intelligent automation platform that can be used by both business and IT. Workato helps you to go beyond app-to-app integration and orchestrate powerful workflow automations across the business. It allows you to pass data between your favorite cloud apps in a step-by-step fashion. It also allows you to integrate the data from chat, social media, calendaring, etc., which are a key part of your daily work with other business data. So Workato lets you create, share, and run powerful integrations between 100 plus apps within minutes. So use Workato to connect your apps and automate your work. Workato was actually built with a single clear vision that's democratizing enterprise class integration. It provides all the features of an iPaaS and actually more. They are data NAP integration, which helps you to have data sync across databases, on-premise and cloud apps to improve data quality and integrity. Then process integration, which helps you to connect any combination of cloud and on-premise apps, databases, AI services to automate business workflows. Then we have workflow automation, which helps to build workflows to automate business processes that require secure and verified human interaction. For example, approval of workflows, exception review, task assignment, etc. And then talking about custom bots, it helps to build interactive intelligent chatbots. For example, a Slack bot, which enables user to complete tasks and workflows directly from chat. For example, say in Slack, you would get a prompt to approve or reject a transfer of load. So if you approve that, the load will then be transferred, right? So then coming to the scalable features of Workato. So Workato is elastic, scalable platform. Workato fully manages the infrastructure, scalability, redundancy, and resource provisioning. Its modern architecture provides horizontal and vertical scaling, load balancing, parallel processing to support traffic with no loss of data. It's reliable, always on access. So with its multi-tenant architecture, it takes care of provisioning, fault tolerance, latency, and uptime. And it's 100% cloud native and is accessible from anywhere. All that you will need is a browser and internet connectivity. And then zero footprint, nothing to install. Since everything is available on cloud, you don't need to download anything, or you don't have any OS compatibility issues. So with this, zero maintenance hassles for IT or businesses, right? So coming to the server updates. So you can find all the information about the server updates on this URL here, status.workato.com. So they include website uptime and downtime, status of recipe job processing, status of on-premise connectivity, status of webhook ingestion, past incidents that affect recipe performance. So all this can be viewed on this URL, status.workato.com. So then coming to the concepts in Workato. So the main important concept is about recipes. So Workato works on integration recipes as the underlying logic. Workato recipes are instructions put together to move any data from one system to another. So when an event specified in the recipe happens, the program automatically runs through the instructions and begins a synchronization process. All recipes have a unique ID that identifies them, and that can be found here in this recipe URL. A recipe contains a trigger followed by one or more actions. The trigger determines when your recipe will be executed, and the actions determine what your recipe will perform automatically. In a recipe, you can connect multiple apps, have multiple actions, and also conditional actions. When this is turned on, it runs in the background until you manually stop your recipe. So then we have triggers. A trigger in a recipe initiates the sync process. Triggers determine what event to listen to in order to execute the actions described in a recipe. Every trigger has at least two elements, the application and the trigger event. The trigger event can be set off in apps when a certain event happens. Say, for example, when a new contact is created, or when a ticket is updated, or according to the schedule. So it can be at a certain time or can be in intervals. Also, depending on the available API, Workato can receive trigger events in real time, or it checks for the occurrence of an event periodically by polling that application. Right? So then actions. We have four different types of actions. They are nested actions, conditional actions, repeat actions, and conditional stop. So nested actions are action within an action. Conditional actions, if you have to have any condition specified, then you'll go with conditional actions. These can actually be identified with prefix if at the beginning of each step. And repeat actions, when you have any loop to be repeated, so then you go with the repeat actions, and this can be identified with the prefix for each item n at the beginning of each step. And if you want to stop the action, then you'll go with conditional stop, right? So then we have connections. Recipes require connections to your applications before they access the data. Every time you create a connection, a pop-up dialog will appear requesting you to authenticate Workato to access your app data. When you give the permission, the connection is created. You can actually have multiple connections to one app, but the older connection will be unauthenticated if you enter the same credentials again. So then we have data tree and data pills. Every step, including trigger, brings data into the recipe. Example, when a new employee in Workday trigger would bring in employee data. The data is made available in the recipe via the data tree. And each individual data fields are called data pills. And then we have jobs. Each time there is a trigger event, the actions in the recipe are executed. The entire flow of each trigger event through the recipe is called a job. Then we have jobs report. The job report gives a high-level summary of all the trigger events processed by the recipe. So here you'll have all the summary of the trigger events processed by that recipe. And then job details. The job details page provides you step-by-step input and output details. This page is actually useful for troubleshooting recipes, as the users are able to view the data passed in each step and the output that is returned from each step, right? So then transaction tips. Every Workato account has a monthly limit. The transaction limit bar helps to keep track of usage in your account. The number of transactions your recipe processes should be limited, as unnecessary steps also may be added to the monthly limit. To help save on the number of unnecessary transactions, Workato has released a feature called trigger filters. Trigger filters appear at the bottom of each trigger step. When you check the box for the trigger, if the option appears.
This conference will now be recorded.
So this is how the trigger filters appear at the bottom of each trigger step. When you check this option for trigger if trigger condition, then a list of options will appear here. So only if this satisfies, it pulls data from the application, right? So now let's go through the Workato UI. So I'll just go to my browser and I'll say www.workato.com. So I'll be landed on this page here. So I can request for a demo, or if I have the credentials, I can log in. I'll log in with my credentials. So this is how the home page looks like. You'll be logged into this page. So here you can see community recipes. So these are the recipes created by the community. They are ready to use. So if you have any requirement, you don't need to start from scratch. So say for example, I need to push data from Salesforce to QuickBooks. So instead of starting from the scratch, I would go here and I'll say search for Salesforce application. So here you'll be able to see the list of recipes. So the recipe collection here. So you can see number of recipes here. Here you can see here something called featured. So featured, which means these are high quality recipes, which are usually commonly used in community, right? So here you'll be able to see Salesforce closed one opportunity creates QuickBooks invoice. So here this also can tell you the data is going from Salesforce to QuickBooks. So I can just click on this, and here it will give you the clear information of what this does, what this recipe does, and what are the apps involved, and this is the logic. So if you're good with all this, you can use this recipe. So I'll go here and I'll say use this recipe. So when I click on this, it will ask for your connections, your QuickBooks connection and your Salesforce connection. So you can provide these connections and you can connect to this particular recipe, right? So then if you see here, this is the support page, support.workato.com. So we have tutorials, we have solution articles, community forums, and you can also send your ticket if you have any issues. Here I have account settings. So here you'll be able to do all your account settings, right? So we'll discuss about all this in detail in our later classes. And coming to the product updates. So you'll be able to see what are the product updates you have. And log out and subscribe. If you click on this, you'll be able to land on this page about the pricing information, right? And then coming to recipes. So this is what we have created now with use recipe. Here you'll be able to see active, recently stopped, and all. So all those that are actively running will come under active, which are stopped, and if any deleted, you'll be able to see them in trash. It is always suggested to create a folder when you're working on it. So I'll create a folder with my name first. I'll say create. So then I'll create a new recipe. So if you see here, what kicks off your workflow? So here you can start with your source. So I'm getting the data from Salesforce. So let's do a simple recipe here of getting the data from Salesforce to uploading it into database. Okay. So you can see the number of trigger events here. So you can see new or updated records, deleted record, new outbound message, new platform event, new record, which is in real time, and also if you want it as batches, you can get them, and new or updated record in real time and also as batches. scheduled record search using SQL, threshold met for new records created. Right? So I'll go with a new or updated record real time. So I've given everything here and I'll say next. So then it will give you if there are any existing Salesforce connections. So these are the Salesforce connections. I'll go and create a new one. I will say Salesforce connect. If you can say if it is a sandbox or no. And I can say linked account. So when I do this, see here, it goes to Salesforce application in order for authentication. So I'll give mine. So it's trying to connect to Salesforce.
This conference will now be recorded.
So now we'll be able to see the connection success message here. I'll then click on next. So here you can set up the trigger. So what object you want to get the data from. See here, it will list all the objects that are there in your Salesforce account. So I'll go with account object and it displays me what fields I have here. So I'll select few. So let's do with these three. So here you'll be able to see when first started this recipe, where should it pick up events from. So I'll say an hour ago. So here if you will be able to see, you can see uh, the options that are available here: yesterday, last week, last month, beginning of time, etc. If not from the list, you can go with your custom value. Here you can give the date or you can go with formulas as well. So for now, I'll select here saying an hour ago. Right? And then I'll say next. So now what action should your recipe do? So you can now tell what action your recipe should do. So now because I need to load the data into database, I'll go and select my database. I'll say MySQL. So you can see here there are two, MySQL and MySQL secondary connections. So for other different connections as well, you'll be able to see one main connection and one secondary connection. So this is for because in a connection you'll be able to in a recipe you'll be able to use only one connection. So if it is required that you have to use another connection, then you'll go with the secondary connections. If say you want to have more number of connections, say like 3 to 4, then the option that is available for you is to have a callable recipe, and then you can give within that recipe. Right? So for now I'll go with MySQL, and you can see the different actions that are available here. Right? So you can upset rows, you can update, insert, delete, etc. So I'll now go and say upset row. I'll say next, and I can give my credentials here. So I'll say MySQL account. I'll say MySQL connect, and I'll give the username and password. Port and the database. So connection success. Remember one thing here. This is an open database connection which I'm trying to connect now. So that's the reason it is able to connect. So see this, is this app in a private network? So I said no gateway, but if this is in a private network, if database is within a firewall, then you need to have a agent installed, on-premise agent. So you need to install that on-premise agent and you need to select that here. So we'll discuss all that later in our classes. Then I'll say next. So here it will display all the uh, table names that are there, or you can enter your table name directly. So here you can see all those table names, whichever are present, it will show for me. So I'll go with account underscore SF and I'll say finish. So see here it said you've set up a recipe. Now let's test it. So first you can test with a single record. So just to make sure about the data quality, whether it's going correct or no from source to target, I'll just say test recipe. So here it says recipe could not find new or updated account in Salesforce. This is the jobs page that has opened. So now what I'll do, I'll modify in my Salesforce account. I'll modify a record earn account. So I'll go to Salesforce. So I'll go to accounts, Workato, and I'll try to change this type from prospect to customer direct. So this is saved. So you can now test your recipe. So it is checking and now you can see processed one job for testing. So you can say start the recipe. Right. So here you'll be able to see an error message. Columns must be present. So you'll be able to click on this and it will give you the complete information. This is the information about the job details page. Here you'll be able to see everything. Input and columns must be present. So here, what is your input? What is your output? So see here what has been modified now. Name, Workato, type, customer direct. So all this have been shown. Debug how much time it's got executed in. So now the columns are not present. So now what we'll do, we'll go back to recipe. I'll go to the recipe here. I'll stop the recipe. So here now if you see, I've created everything here. And I'll now add the fields which have to be mapped. So what all I've got here is, see here, this is the data tree. It gives me all those fields that are coming from the Salesforce, the first step. And each one is called a data pill. So I'm getting account ID, account name, account type. So let's map them. So account type, account name, and SF ID. And I'll say apply changes. So now I can map them. Account type. So I can say here account type. I'll just click here and this will be mapped. and SF ID with account ID and SF name with account name. So here these are mapped, and now I will save the changes. So now you can run this again. So instead of running this again or modifying here, what I can do here is I'll go to jobs and I'll repeat the job. So here you're repeating with the same payload that you've got here. It says one job repeated. And you can see the status completed, right? So this is now done. So now if I go here and see what we have modified here, the type should be customer direct. So if I now go into my MySQL, this is loading. So you can see here Workato and the account type is customer direct. Right? So this has been modified from prospect to customer direct. So this is a simple recipe and we have seen how we have tested it. Right? So here we can now, since this is tested and it's working fine, you can start the recipe so that you can execute it and you can test it. Once this is tested, once it is started, you can also stop your recipe whenever you want. Okay. So then, so this is about the recipes here. Coming to the dashboard. Coming to the dashboard here, you'll be able to see how many recipes, one successful, failed jobs, app connections. So everything in a diagrammatic, in a pictorial representation, you'll be able to see. There's a dependency graph. If there's anything you can see here, and the activity audit. So what is happening in detail, you'll be able to see in your account, right? And the app connections. So you can directly manage your app connections from here. You can see what we have connected. Salesforce Connect. We have created these connections, right? Salesforce and MySQL. You'll be able to see them here and modify them directly from here if required. And then coming to recipes is something we already spoke about. So tools. So coming to the tools, these are the different options that are available for us in Workato, right? So coming to the common data models. So you can see here, we need to have a standard schema for any organization so that it helps in talking with different applications. So the common data models allows us to create a common data model, which also known as canonical model or abstract model. See here, I'll just go and say here, create a data model. So here I'll be able to define my schema, right? So these shared schemas are created in Workato, created in this Workato are used currently in Java Message Service Connector and Mapper Connector. And we have custom connectors here. So you can say if you want to build robust custom application connections on Workato's software development kit to connect to your any application that Workato doesn't currently support, you can do that from here. You can create a connector. So here we can create a connector like this. Then we have lookup table. So with Workato's lookup tables, we can define which value on system A should be mapped with which value on system B. I can import from CSV, or I can set up a lookup table manually. And we have message templates. So message templates allow you to create static templates for commonly used messages that can be used in multiple recipes. So I'll create a new template. Workato templates use Mustache as a templating language. Message templates can be used to generate HTML, text, JSON, XML messages. So here we can separate the message composition logic. So which means what the message should look like from the message generation logic. That is when the message should be sent. So this separation helps the template developer to change the format of the message without making changes to the recipe that sends the message out. Right? So then we have on-prem groups. So if you have to connect to any applications like databases which are behind the firewall, we need to install on-premise agent as we have already discussed earlier. So that we do it here. So coming to people task. The people task allows to have human interaction and approval in an automated workflow process. When people task is added in recipe, it requires a human to approve before it can continue. Right? This allows for multiple people from different departments to coordinate with an automated recipe. And then coming to the properties. So these account properties that you define here, it allows you to store account-wide recipe configuration parameters. They show up in all recipes under the properties data tree. They're also known as environment variables or configuration variables, right? And we have pub or sub topics. So these allow recipes to subscribe to events published by other recipes, reducing dependencies. You can create a topic here. And recipe lifecycle management. So in real time, we may have different environments like development environment, testing environment, production environment, etc. So once the recipe is tested in dev environment, we need to move it to the testing environment and then to prod. This moving of recipes from different environments is done using this recipe lifecycle management. So you'll create a manifest, you'll export it, then it will create a zip file for you, so which you can import in another account for a different environment. Then team. So this helps to collaborate with multiple users to build recipes in a shared workspace. You can invite the collaborator here. So then we have workbot. So this is a Workato chatbot that helps you monitor and interact with your business apps from within a Slack or Teams. Right? So click on Discover More Tools. So we have API platform. With this, you can try to you can turn any recipe or collection of recipes on Workato into an API endpoint that can be exposed to public. Right?
This conference will now be recorded.
So then we have custom auth profiles. Here you can centrally manage and share your Slack workbot permissions with your team with this custom auth profiles. So then going back to our slides. So with that, we are done with the Workato UI walkthrough. And as we have seen the tools in Workato, so they are actually categorized into three: builder, recipe, connect apps, and collaborating and managing recipes. So if you see under build a recipe, we have seen properties, lookup table, people task, message templates, common data models, pub or sub, workboard for Slack, workboard for Microsoft Teams. And under connect tabs, we have connector SDK, on-prem agent, API management. In collaborating and managing recipes, we have recipe lifecycle management and teams. So finally, components of a recipe and glossary of terms. So under components of a recipe, we see unique ID. So a unique number appended to your recipe, and a name, which is a name or title which can be modified. Trigger. One trigger specifies what event to look out for actions, one or more actions which takes place when the trigger fires. Then we have job history, which exists when the recipe has processed at least one record. And we have test button that sends the latest job into the recipe to be processed. We have start button, which starts the recipe, and once it is started, you can stop it as well. Copy or delete button, which creates a copy of the recipe or deletes it completely. Recipe description, which lets you write a simple or elaborate description for your recipe. And app connection parameter, which specifies the sign-in credentials for logging into the app. And save recipe or refresh schema and save button. So this saves the current settings or refreshes and then saves the recipe, right? So then we have glossary of terms. So the common terms are input fields. So these input fields are the fields that are used to map data into. Most actions have input fields and you can find them on the left side of the recipe. So then we have data tree or data pills. So data tree are the data that are coming from the previous step, where you can drag and drop into the input fields on the left. And each individual data, each individual element here is called data pill, right? And a trigger and trigger if. So each recipe has only one trigger which describes and tells the system when to start a recipe. You can filter jobs with conditions. Then we have actions. So actions describes the linear sequence of work your recipe performs when it is triggered. So there are 4 types of actions as we discussed: action, conditional, nested action, conditional action, repeat action, and conditional stop. Featured recipes. So these featured recipes are high quality recipes that are widely used by the Workato community. Active or inactive recipes. While you logged in, your main Workato page displays running recipes in the active tab and displays stopped recipes in the inactive tab. Repeat jobs. You can repeat a job that was previously processed by clicking on the report job button on the right of your every job. And job history. Job history shows a list of completed jobs in a recipe. There are different states: processing, warning, complete, error, and a recommended recipe. So recommended recipes are recipes you might find useful based on the apps that you are using. You can get your own copy of a recipe by clicking get recipe and start using it to integrate your recipes. So these are the glossary of terms. So that's the end of our session today. Thank you. Have a